Southwest Fire Academy was established in 2015 as a response to the recognized need for quality, safe, and affordable fire and rescue training in Ontario. This is not your average fire college. SFA has high standards for their students, and it is their mission to teach and produce qualified, ambitious firefighters who are prepared to work hard to serve their communities. This is not a diploma mill. This is where you can learn strategic, aggressive firefighting from passionate, intelligent instructors who never forget why they were made to do this job. SFA is an accredited private career college that is regulated by the Ministry of Training, colleges, and universities, with a memorandum of understanding with the Office of the Fire Marshal. This means that SFA is an approved training provider with the OFM, and the programs are recognized in Ontario. Check out their pre-service and expanding selection of course offerings at southwestfireacademy.ca. Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 127 of Multiple Calls. I'm Scott Hewlett. Some people are choosing the discomfort they are comfortable with. The workout, the cold plunge, the Spartan race. But they are quietly, and they think secretly, avoiding things that actually make them freeze. A fire training ground or lecture hall full of tough guys. And no one is scrambling to go first or answer a question posed by the speaker. The loudest critics of others are clammed up about their mistakes during the post-fire discussion. Why? Because they're afraid. The guys that are supposedly comfortable doing uncomfortable things, suddenly when it counts, scared of the judgment of others. It should be a screaming, visceral experience for them that puts being brave talking about your mental health struggles, for example, in perspective. The focus is always on the person being brave enough to speak up, and not on the crowd that creates the environment that makes it necessary to be brave in the first place. Going first, asking the question, telling your story. None of these things are brave to do if they are normal, if the environment encourages it. Instead of praising people for their bravery, protect in place and remove the threat. Call out those that perpetuate the fear. Here's my chat with Kiel Samsing.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Kyle.
Finally get to sit down and do this.
Glad we're finally making it happen.
Two kids, well, it'll be 7 soon, but two kids under 6 and under is,
Yeah.
everything pops up, and then I got put on 8-hour days, so that didn't help.
Okay. A role change?
I'm pretty much become like the lieutenant in charge of operations, so I kind of help the ops chief out, balancing some stuff out. They pulled 3 lieutenants, tenured lieutenants off the floor to help with administrative duties. So 2 went to EMS and I went to fire. So I was the lucky one, obviously.
Permanent spot or like a secondment?
No, it's a 2 years. And then I'm in the captain's process right now. So if I get made in that, then I'll actually come out of this role as well. But I've come out of this firmly believing now that everybody should do some time in admin because it changes your perspective on what they deal with and the things that go through. There's just so much more to it. You think the fire department can just do whatever it wants, but if you're part of any size municipality, it's always a tug of war with the city and with HR, and it's a mess. So I'm glad I've seen it. So it gives me a lot more perspective to kind of be like, all right, guys, change is coming. Just got to slow down and be patient and wait it out. So it's been good, but it got pretty frustrating for a little while when I first got up there because you're so into the mission and then the mission changes. So you got to kind of find worth somewhere else. So
yeah, a lot of stuff to navigate, a lot of programs going on at the same time. And
there's no job description for what I'm doing. So I'm kind of just making it up as I go and be like, hey, chief, this would help operations. And, either I get the green light or I don't, and then push forward. But we've been able to change a lot. We have all new manuals. So we have a truck manual, an engine manual, forced entry manual, a search manual, ventilation manual, all that for people to refer to. So that way we don't have to have any outside books. We just have it. And they're QA'd by SMEs like Andrew Pricedeck did the forcible entry one. And it's the Newport News way, right? So that way when you go up for promotion, you're not studying Norman's company officer book, right? Like it's a great book, don't get me wrong, but it's very hard to apply towards what most fire departments do. So those manuals and then our guidelines, which is our standard orders, it just gives you, it's all educational for like the first 20 or 30 pages. And then it gets into strategy and tactics. But the goal is to be able to give that to somebody that's just left the fire academy and be like, hey, if you study this every day for 5 years or whenever you're on shift for 5 years, when that's up, which is when you can start acting officer, you'll have a really gigantic knowledge base. Because we lost a lot of people. We've lost 2 whole fire departments since I've been here.
Wow.
In 18 years. So they just go to Virginia Beach. We have a state retirement system and a regional fire academy. So if you get hired somewhere, you can take your time with you and not lose any retirement time. It's hard to keep people local. We've got a lot of bridge tunnels. People don't want to do a lot of traffic driving. So we've lost a lot of people just on that. And we lost a lot of educational, knowledge base. So because it's all verbal taught down. So we put it in that writing format, which has been really beneficial. And guys can be like, oh yeah, I saw that on this page. And that way you're just like, hey, here's what my senior guy taught me, and you can add it to it. It's a living document. So it'll build and transform as it goes forward. So it at least makes us one fire department instead of 2 battalions, 3 shifts. So with 6 different fire departments. So that's nice.
Do you have more people transferring out than transfer in? Is it off balance?
We have far more going out than in, and most will go some will go to like Virginia Beach, which is some stations are slower, some are busier. So it's kind of like a 1-for-1, but then other people will go to the county departments around us just to slow it down a little bit, right? Guys running 15, 20 calls a day, they'll go and run 5 to 10 and just makes it a little easier for them. So it's a hard thing to kind of pull, but lately, because we've changed a lot of things, we've gotten quite a few laterals in with some like really solid people that have come in from the counties, realized we've got something special, and it's not just about call volume. They want to come in and work for some chiefs and some officers that really kind of get it, and are pushing forward. And we just, we bought 2 tillers that'll be in 2 years. We've just almost replaced our whole fleet within the last 5. And so we started the smooth bores and where we work's kind of peninsula. So on the peninsula, we were kind of the leader in smooth bores, and everybody's kind of catching up to us on the fire side. We got some catching up to do on the EMS side, but we're working on that.
Nice. Well, usually we do a bit of backstory on you, but you've done some great episodes like Weekly Scrap, The Pipe Man. You were on that one. Student of the Game, I think, was your most recent one. And they did a great job of covering a lot of your backstory. But I did want to touch on, you and I have a bit of 6 degrees of separation because of Orangeville and Brampton.
Yes, sir.
Give me the backstory on that.
So I was actually born in Guelph. That's where I'm originally from. That's where my parents moved. They used to live in Brampton. They moved to Guelph. They moved back to Brampton. And for the longest time, up until probably 5 or 6 years ago, that's where all my aunts, uncles, grandparents, they all lived in there. So I'd go back there all the time. And just, I love Brampton. It's amazing since I've been alive watching the growth of that town. About 10 years ago, my cousin, who's kind of like my little brother, he moved out to Orangeville. And so now when I go up and visit, now his parents have moved out there, and my grandma's now in a retirement community out in Orangeville as well. So, we go and see some of the outstanding, relatives around Toronto, but then go out to Orangeville and see them. Actually, I think my aunt and uncle, I can't remember the name of the town, but it's literally right next to Orangeville. We love it up there. And, we get to go to their cottage up in Sable Beach, which I guess it's not Sable Beach anymore. They changed the name.
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
I grew up going there.
It's hard to explain to people what Sable's like. It's like, it's like a 1950s beach town from a movie, where something usually goes wrong in the movie, but in the town, you still, all the kids still walk and go to Dairy Queen. They used to have a drive-in theater and an outside roller rink. I don't know if any of that's still there.
And fresh water and no sharks.
Yes, yeah. And the water's nice. There's no riptide. You don't have to worry about anything bothering you except for like maybe somebody's drunk relative throwing stuff at you, but that's about it.
Right,
Right.
Well, it's good to know you come up here once in a while because we'll be able to actually connect and grab lunch sometime.
Taken my kids a few times, and my wife and I go up, and we don't get to see our families enough. My wife's family lives in Nebraska, and my immediate family, my brother and my mom live in Tampa, Florida. But the rest of my family is all up there in Orangeville, in Toronto, and all my sports teams are Toronto. So,
nice.
I trying to get my kids into this. Is not a good year for the Leafs.
Is it ever a good year for the Leafs?
I, you know what? They've at least made the playoffs. Like the last 8 seasons or the last 10 seasons.
Yeah.
But this one's kind of a stinker. My kids are like, "Why aren't we watching hockey?" They get so used to that schedule of like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday,
Sure.
and I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. But baseball season's coming, so maybe the Blue Jays will make it a little bit better for me.
Right on. Yeah, close last year. It was a good one.
I don't care. Whatever happens with the Blue Jays is icing on the cake because I'm old enough to remember 92, 93, those seasons. I was living near Philadelphia when Joe Carter hit that home run.
Nice.
I can always shame my old New Jersey friends with that because I remember staying up late watching that game and watching that home run. And anything that happens with the Blue Jays for the rest of my life is good. I had a back-to-back World Series championships, so everything else is just bonus.
Right on. Why don't we dive into Mind of Fire? Let's start off there, how that got started, and give me a bit of how you led into that.
I had always kind of wanted to teach and be involved in things. And I started teaching estimating the stretch. That was kind of what we did. And the guys in here in Newport News, there are two, they no longer work in the city. One works in a county and then one works for the shipyard and the fire department. But we started a group called Tailboard Training. And we went around to different Virginia departments and we were really big on stating, hey, this is what we do. I'm not teaching you all this crazy stuff that some people teach these days. I really kept in my lane to estimating the stretch. I think at the time I had like 7 or 8 years paid, or maybe less than that. But I knew how to do this estimating stretch, right? Like that was my big thing. And then eventually kind of branched out and used my experience on the job and other places to teach more. Started a FDIC class. First, it was like Not Your Barbie's Fireground or something like that. And Bobby Halton changed the name to Real Houses, Not Doll Houses. Because that was a time where like that dollhouse thing was big. And what we wanted to do, we wanted to get an acquired structure. It didn't end up happening. We got a burn building in Brownsburg outside of Indy and try to frame it out as like a real house. So we tried to do our best. They ended up, I think they did like smoke pots the next couple of years after that to make it more realistic. But it's so hard to do live burns, especially the FDIC. But the year I went to FDIC and this whole kind of created, I had met Nate Flynn, who died in Howard County, Maryland, in a fire, 2018. I think it was July 23rd, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head.
Yeah, everybody should watch the Nate Flynn Training Days 2020, where Josh gives the presentation on the Woodscape fire. That's like a must see for everybody.
Yeah, and that's a game changer. And we watched it closely because I was on shift. I was going into shift when I found out that Nate had died. And I had already kind of been thinking about the psychological side of the fire service for a while. I had read Combat Position from Chris Brennan. I think it's Marlo Brennan now. I don't want to misname Brennan, but he wrote a fantastic book called The Combat Position. It's still probably one of the best fire books written out there. And it goes into like human dynamics in the fire service. And he was kind of my introduction to Boyd. And he was part of Fire Service Warrior and that whole thing with Brian Brush and Gary Lane. And all these folks back in the day, all these guys that are big names now were in this kind of group called Fire Service Warrior. It got me interested in this book called Boyd. And it was a book about John Boyd, who's a fighter pilot in Korea. And he went on to teach fighter pilot and he ended up like designing different planes, the F-15, the F-16. He was involved in developing the A-10. He pretty much wrote the Bible on air-to-air combat as well. Very little's changed in that. But then he kind of got into like the psychology of it all, right? From kind of the Red Baron kind of thought process to more of a higher level thinking. He was noticing that the planes that were the most successful had bubble canopies. So even a plane could not be, you look at Korea, I think the shoot down rate of the Sabre was something like 15-1 or 10-1 over the MiG. At the time, the MiG, the Russian jet, was far superior in climb rate and turning radius and everything. And it turned out that it was because the MiG didn't have a bubble canopy. So it limited the information that the fighter pilot could take in. And so the Sabre was more successful because at the end of the day, it can better thrust, higher turn radius, all that stuff. But the most important part of that jet is who's flying it. And if you don't have all the information, you're not going to do much behind it. So I kind of went from Boyd into, there was a book by Frank Osinga. He wrote a whole thesis on Boyd. And it's very, very deep, very heavy. I could go hours talking about John Boyd and his theories. Then it led me to another book called Mind of War. And that was another kind of biography and thought process on Boyd. And I got really kind of pulled down that rabbit hole on theoretical things. And I was at the same time in my fire service career, I was teaching engine company ops. But that time, my firehouse was 2 engines, a heavy rescue, and an ambulance. And it was the busiest firehouse in our city. And on a first alarm assignment, I'm dropping 11, 12 people out of my first 2 house with 2 engines out of it. And, I'm teaching people this tactics, and they just can't do the same thing I am. Because, I'm not going to, usually when you start out teaching, you go to your same size or below. You don't really go to like bigger departments unless you're a significant name. And so I was going to these departments and I'm like, hey, can you guys do this? And they're like, no. And I realized that you're just listening to me pontificate about what we do if you can't do it. What's the use of me telling you anything? So I kind of set my goal on finding something that was applicable to everybody, because it's important to have that. Because if, God bless them, you look, some of these FDNY guys have been to so much, but it's very hard to take that experience and apply it to what most fire departments do across the country. Even like Toronto, like God bless Captain Brooks, he's so good at relating that. But if you're not careful, they have just so many resources and so many folks, and it's hard to translate that to. So you've got to really be a gifted speaker, a gifted instructor, and somebody like a Timmy Collette or Salka or Uncle Ray. They're so good at relaying that, but it can be difficult if you're not well versed in teaching. So I really wanted something that was applicable to everybody. And I kind of was thinking about the OODA loop. And the more I kind of deep dove and went into some of these books, I'm realizing that all the RPDM, recognition, prime decision making, system 1 and system 2 thinking from Daniel Kahneman, all these current thought processes on decision making all have their roots in the OODA loop. The OODA loop, there's 2 ways to go through it, implicit and explicit. So either an automatic or a more step-by-step process, right? That's not an automatic process. So you've got to slow it down. And it's just like system 1 and system 2 thinking. Recognition, prime decision-making works the same way. That's the implicit part of the OODA loop. So even the more modern ones where people are rebranding the OODA loop into something using different initials, that's the way your brain works. You orient it, you decide on it and act. Boyd would say that you would come up with a hypothesis and test the hypothesis, but it doesn't quite fit as well as OODA does. But that kind of opened my eyes, and I'm like, man, this is applicable to everything. And the more experienced folks I talked to, they were telling me like, hey, man, when we talk about this, you're quantifying or putting into words things that I've done for 15 years, but I could never put them into words. I couldn't explain how I do things. So now you're giving me why I do them. And so it's one of the most things. I was just writing a post that's going to post tomorrow on social media. That's the most common thing folks say to me is you quantify these things that I've done for years. And that's the point, because you can't pass on something that you can't explain. And now we can shorten experience levels, right? So the 25-year guy can explain to the 5-year guy why he does what he does, and they can learn on it and train on it. So Mind to Fire just kind of came out of this whole need and desire to want to find something that was applicable to the whole fire service instead of just being able to pass on what I do regionally. I wanted to have an effect in change things. And a lot of that spurned from kind of merging and figuring out the training aspect. And then another point came from, Nate's death. So kind of a culmination of factors that kind of split into it. But I'm so grateful for the opportunity to do what I do and pass that stuff on.
How'd the book come together?
The book came together. I never thought of writing a book. In fact, there was a master firefighter, one of my firehouses. He's now a captain in our city. He used to joke on me saying I'm not a fire celebrity and you won't be, which isn't a real thing, by the way. But he thought so. He would beg, you're not one till you write a book and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I will never write a book. That is not who I am. Until I got 70, 80 books deep into researching the OODA loop and neuroscience in general, right? Like it expands beyond just OODA in the book. Just understand your vision, your attentional process, your short-term memory, your long-term memory, your working memory. So there's all this stuff that plays into it. And I was just like, I have nowhere for this information to go. A good friend of mine recommended, hey man, write it down. If you want to get it out, write it down. And it was the technical jargon or the more in-depth stuff that really wouldn't fit into a class. So that's why I tell people, like, if you like the class, which is the basic skeleton, we talk about it, put it together, the book goes into more depth about it and you can highlight it and really follow it up. And, I'm not an author by any stretch of the imagination. I have ADD, so there's parts that probably repeat themselves, and I couldn't afford an editor, right? I've got 2 kids, 6 and under, and I work. My wife works part-time, but she's a stay-at-home mom. So money's not exactly something I can just throw around to go hire a nice editor. But we figured it out, we put it together, and I think it's gone well. I had somebody that I really, really respect the other day text me and said, I haven't highlighted or taken notes in a book like this in my entire life.
Wow.
So thank you. And I was like, oh, awesome. And then he followed it up with the same thing I hear from people with their kind of experience level is you're putting words to stuff of how I do things. And it's so hard for me to explain that, but now I have the concepts behind them and the words to do it. So now I can pass it on and train on it and push it down. Kids these days, I say kids these days, I'm only 43, but we've got folks that are 5 years in the job and they're riding officer. Maybe they've gone to a fire or two. And so we really want to shorten that time constraint or those time difficulties we have because they can't afford to wait to get the experience. We've just got to roll with it. And today, more important than ever, a lot of these younger kids are getting their information from like second and third hand learning that it's experience from somebody else. So they may not have that ability to slow things down, or they may be unnecessarily too aggressive. And I say this in my classes that I really think we are in for a little bit of a reckoning in the next probably 5 or 10 years because the internet has made the information accessible, which is fantastic, but it doesn't explain the nuance of the job, which is so important. And I think a lot of people forget to go into that detail because it doesn't exactly get likes or clicks. But if we can pass on the nuance or the thought process of it all, we'd be doing the fire service a great favor because these younger kids want to get at it and want to be the best of the job. But there's some things, if you've got any time in the job, the number one thing you can always do is just take a deep breath and slow down. Not stop, not go slow. Just slow it down. Trying to get some of this stuff across to some of these younger kids is important. I've been mocked for it plenty of times, and I'm all right with it. But I've been there. I was that kid, being like, I'm going to kick in every door, and it's trying to save some kids or guys in their early 20s a lot of heartache on the back end. And I don't know if I'll be successful with it, but I'm going to throw it out there and see if it sticks and try to make things better for the fire service.
Do you feel that the fire service in general is confusing having an incident management system and the tactics with decision making? Like it's a missing piece that they don't recognize is there. They think the incident management system and the tactics are the decision making.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think they understand how efficient a system can be or having a framework can be because decision making, all the work is done beforehand. And so when people hear or they go to a decision making class, most people don't need help picking between 3 options, right? We've gotten this far in a job that's fairly complex and technical. You can choose between options. I don't need to give you a framework to choose options. What you need the framework in is to train the prerequisites for decision making. And that's where that paying attention to how you observe your visual cues, your visual pattern recognition, working memory, all those things come into play because that beginning part is the decision making, going through. And, I've sat in some guys' classes where I'm going to teach you how to make decisions. Man, I got up today, picked my outfit, picked my breakfast, brushed my teeth. Like I know how to do this. That's not the hard part for us. The hard part is recognizing times to try to make a better opportunity or make more of an impact or slow down or those kind of things, understanding when to go slow and fast as opposed to picking between 2 or 3 tactics, because that's the easy part. That stuff should just flow as you go on, saying we don't have enough cognitive bandwidth to sit there on scene and go, oh, I see this. This must lead to that. That must lead to that. You don't. Your working memory is shot. Your cognition's shot. Your stress levels are high because people aren't going to fires like they used to. So again, the whole work needs to be on the front end so we can recognize the opportunities to act and to make a difference.
Tell me about the partnership with Mastermind Cognitive Training.
So that's something that kind of came about last year, 2 years ago. I had really got into Buster Madsen's, I think that's how you say his name. He's a gentleman from Europe. He's Danish. He was teaching elite soccer teams in Europe, and I think he works for a team in either Dubai or Saudi Arabia now, like how to become better athletes and how to train a good athlete versus an amazing athlete. And a lot of it comes down to these trainable features, including the working memory, the cognitive rate, all these things that we discuss through Mind to Fire. And I kind of ran into a company. They existed for about 3 or 4 years, and I talked to them about maybe doing something just fire service, just us. But they already had this framework worked out, and what I wanted to do was get people in to try it. And so you do a free 7-day trial, and one of the things with them, what I love so much is there's no auto renewal. Like you put your information in, but at the 7 days, once it expires, it just goes away. It doesn't force you to auto renew. You can do it on an iPad, you can do it on a phone, you can do it on VR goggles. And the first thing they do is an assessment report, and you see where you're at. So you quantitatively can work on your focus and attention, your working memory, reaction time, response inhibition, which is actually a huge part of what we do, object tracking, processing speed, all these things that we can put a number to and train it on. And the nice thing is, if you're struggling with something, you look at, we talk to departments about officers that are on PIPs and like, well, they just can never seem to make a decision. All right, well, now we can put them through this assessment, figure out their weak points and work on them. Otherwise, in the past, it was all just done anecdotally, right? Like, oh, well, I put him through a simulation or a fire training program and he did okay or he did terrible and now he's improving, right? You don't really see any market improvement. You don't see any way to track that. You're just saying, in my opinion, they're better. And so what Mastermind does is gives us the prerequisites in the neuroscience realm to be able to train and track them and see how much you improve. And then, one of the other things with them is that they're like, hey, set the price. Our price is this point. And I said, whatever you guys have to do to cover your costs, that's the basic. I don't want to add anything more onto it. Because it can get pricey. I think ours is $25 a month, but something you can kind of start and stop as you need it. But we have no way to test that now. And at the current time, I had no way to do that other than just some basic neuroscience tests. But the way that they've gamified it is people enjoy it because it's a gamified experience and it doesn't seem so long. But you'll walk away after the first assessment if you take it seriously, mentally exhausted. Like you're worn out. Like, man, especially if you do it on the VR headset, because it pulls all that neuroscience part of your brain and really makes you focus on things. So once you've done that, you do feel mentally exhausted because more often than not, we're on autopilot because the brain wants to use as little effort as possible. The brain kind of wants to stay in a stasis form and doesn't want to kick in that explicit way of thinking. So when you have to do it for 30 minutes and it's all focused, it really does feel exhausting. They're great guys. They have in-shop like experience that they do, and they hold sporting training, which is primarily what it's focused on is sports psychology training. But we've talked about maybe doing something hands-on at their workshop. So instead of people doing the cognitive assessment anywhere else, we can give them iPads or VR headsets and then work and actually do some of the exercises in person and work with some of their psychologists. I think that would be a lot of fun to do that, and then also do fire ground simulations. I've been trying to work with an eye tracking company because that stuff's super expensive as well. As I want to see where firefighters are looking, because we know traditionally with houses that's been done before for eye tracking. They look at like the major architectural features, so doors and windows and chimneys. Like it's just how human beings respond. But I'd like to see where firefighters look and see if that's trainable. And we can kind of fix on it too, or say, hey, don't look at the fire because your brain's automatically going to register it, which it does because it's a life threat. So now maybe we can change how we think of, instead of thinking of the big picture, now we can kind of put in the framework what you need to look at to increase your odds of success on the fire ground. But that's something coming on the back end that's kind of opened up since our partnership with Mastermind. But they've been fantastic. I'm probably pretty poor at checking in with them because I think I'm their first partnership with the fire service, but I need to get better at that. But again, kids and 8-hour shift days make it a little tough, but they're doing amazing things.
Are some people just more naturally gifted at that style of decision-making or decision-making in general? Do people fall into like a general bell curve where you have people that aren't really good at it and then the mass of the population, you have people that excel?
That's what I'm seeing, but a lot of it takes deliberate practice. So it's not anything that you can't try to improve on. And that's the nice thing is it does follow your general population bell curve. My working memory is my poor thing of it. And I always tell people like the way you can tell your working memory is poor is if your wife or your husband gives you a list of 5 things to grab at the store and you always forget 2 of them, then your working memory's low and it's something you need to work on. And I knew that from my ADHD diagnosis that I struggle with that kind of thing. But it's trainable and understanding how to work it. And working memory is nice because it's not something you keep in, but it's kind of like a working dry erase board, right? You can write stuff down, merge 2 things, erase it, start over. That's your working memory. It goes a lot into your processing and your ability to manipulate this information to something we can utilize. And if I can train that and train these kind of other neuroscience things, then we're really onto something. Because the way we've done it now is just said, well, either you're good or you're not. Their strong suit is that, and we don't know that because we haven't trained. Somebody might be better at something else, and I even think at some point that should play somewhere into promotional tests of if somebody doesn't meet a certain standard for these things, then they're not where they should be at. And again, what nice thing is now you can quantify it and put it on a PIP or put it on a performance plan and say, hey, this is where you need to be, and we'll offer retrainings and do those kind of things. But just saying that everybody's different and hoping for the best, it isn't a winning thing. And that's kind of where we go on. Again, we've got the platforms, and Mastermind's not the only one. There's plenty of them out there that give you this insight. And I really think that's where we need to be at, because a lot of folks, let's be honest, get lucky on fire grounds, and then all of a sudden that they're an expert, right? And what have worked on that fire ground may never work on another one. Or, you've got some people that are teaching decision making that had like one incident they're famous for. It's not knocking anybody, but they use that to teach decision making. And there's so much luck that goes into it that it's really about the process as opposed to the outcome. But we have these guys that teach based on the outcome, not necessarily on their process. And we need scientifically validated processes. And one of the things that does that is the neuroscience program that Mastermind put together, and then all the stuff that based on the OODA loop and the other information that we have in the class.
Have you gone through this yourself? Like, how have you navigated your working memory issues or ADHD? Like, how has that been since childhood till now? And how have you navigated the world?
So I lucked out that I'm not tooting my own horn by saying this, but I'm fairly intelligent, right? So I got through my ADHD to college, and I was like a 3.8 kid in school. I know they've since changed the GPA things, but 3.8 used to be fairly high when 4.0 was the highest. And then I went to college and it all fell apart because I no longer had anybody setting my schedule for me. Like I could overcome not reading or not maybe paying attention to because I could study or figure it out or know how to take a test and be okay. But when there was nothing there scheduled and you could do whatever you wanted, it fell apart. And I actually failed out of college twice. When I would go to class, I would get an A in the class, but it was very rare. I would much rather have been playing beer pong in somebody's basement on a Tuesday night. So a lot of that changed when I got into the fire service. I took my first EMT class in like 2005 at the volunteer department that I ended up joining. And that was like being in high school again. Like I didn't need to focus because I liked it so much. The firefighting and the EMS side of it, I liked it so much that it held my attention. Right. And so I eventually got on Adderall, and that helped too, definitely through paramedic class. But when you like something or you have a big interest in it, and ADHD people will agree, is like you don't have to put in the effort as much because your interest in it drives that so much. And so I lucked out getting into something that I really enjoy, and that's kind of allowed me to deal with my ADHD. But I think, like my whole life too, I was battling anxiety and depression and other things. And as my life balanced out with the ADHD in a career that I liked, doing something that I liked, drinking and other things like that, and being an adult and the anxiety and stress of that revealed my depression and my anxiety sides as well. And that's something that happened after Nate died. I drank a lot. I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober this October. It'll be 5 years. But, those kind of things, I got on an antidepressant, marked my anxiety and worked through it and quit drinking and went to therapy and all those things. And that's kind of helped out with the working memory is going through the same thing. It's putting the work in, right? And so you're going through different tests. There's all sorts of psychological tests for out there, whether they're gamified or just normal ones. If you look into any sports psychology, there's tons of stuff in there, even on focus. One of the hardest things for ADHD people to do is focus. But if you do like the number match where it's like a big box, it looks like Sudoku, but with everything filled in, and you're literally trying to find it from 0 to 100, and you go through this box with randomly scattered numbers, and you figure it out, and it increases your attention and your focus. So there's all sorts of stuff out there to get on it. It's just a matter of being honest with yourself and knowing your limits and knowing where your good sides and your bad sides are. And again, that's why something like the mastermind is great, because it shows you can't argue with numbers. It's kind of like having a helmet camera. I love having a helmet camera at work, because even in training, like, people can't argue that they did or didn't do something, because it's right there on the footage, right? So if you give me an assessment and say, hey, this is how you performed, or here's your strong suit and here's your weak points, just accordingly, I can't argue with it. I know that that's where I am. It's the ability to say, all right, I am weak here. Let me work on it. And in working on those working memory issues has been fantastic. As my wife's saying, oh my God, you came home with everything from the store. Or, oh, you remember to grab this for dinner. Yeah, of course. But again, it's just like anything else. You've got to take the step to realize that you've got something to work on and be motivated enough to push through it.
Having had these experiences and worked through them yourself, with firefighters you're able to spend any amount of time with, not that you're diagnosing people, but do you notice things in certain firefighters and can sort of see that they may be struggling with the same things and be able to help them out?
I can see a lot of the lead up signs. Obviously, I don't have any background. We're blessed. My deputy chief that works operations, he's working on he's going to be a licensed therapist, and he's fantastic. So I'll leave that up to my classically trained brothers and sisters to do all that. But I can notice that, like, the warning signs, especially about alcohol, and I can kind of relay the signs and symptoms that I ignored as just anxiousness or other things that were actually indicators of depression to other people. So I can at least mention it. And it's been no secret that I know that everybody says, oh, it's Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'm the first one to stand up and be like, hey, listen, I'm sober for almost 5 years. If you want to know how I did it, or how I keep doing it, or want to work on it, or just want to talk about it, I'm here. And we've had some moderate success with locally working on that with some folks, and my department knows, and you've got to be an advocate for it. And you've got to let a lot of people kind of find their own way to things, because if you question them, and even me, like, I had people question me if I was okay for years, and I'm fine. But until you really realize that you're not okay, or you're struggling with something, nothing can happen. You won't get any better. So I like to just throw it out there and then be a conduit to somebody. Oh, okay. All right. I was on our peer support team for a few years. Hey, all right, let's go on Psychology Today and find a local practitioner that sounds like something that might be in line with what you're going through, or might have the same interests, right? So you can at least find somebody you can relate to. And that's one thing that I'll forever do, and advocate for people to find help for anything they've got going on, whether that's mental stuff or even physical stuff or substance abuse. If you throw it out there, somebody's going to identify with it and try to improve on it. And I let the trained people take it from there. I just try to connect somebody with some resources and go.
Do you find your department's pretty good with a culture around mental health?
Oh, absolutely. My department's fantastic. We have an Ally Connect program now it's like a weekly or monthly check-in app that connects you with help anonymously. Obviously, like I said, one of our deputy chiefs is training in clinical therapy, and he's a great resource. We've had a peer support team now for just about 10 years. There's ups and downs with those kind of things all the time, because things are always changing and people are moving around, or life changes. But it's been a really big push. Our department's really good about understanding things, including substance abuse issues and stuff like that. The chief always says, if I know about it, I can help you, and we can work through it. It's like anything else in life. When you try to hide things and say, oh no, I don't have a problem, or deny a test or something like that, that's when things go sideways. But my department has always been, well, at least in the last 10 years, has been a huge advocate of mental health. And I'm so grateful that we don't have the stigma anymore around it. Not that I ever felt like we did, but it's almost been completely erased. There's not a whole lot of that machismo, or just tough it out kind of thing. It's, oh, somebody went to a bad call, let's get down there and just just hang out, bring food, just do something. We don't need to do a debriefing or defusing or anything like that. One of the best things people can do is just talk. What better place to talk than the firehouse kitchen table? And so when you have a department that notes these bad incidents or goes, oh man, that guy's been on two or three of these bad calls, pediatric codes or shootings or whatever in the past month, we really need to get down there and just talk to them. When your admin chiefs are noticing that and making the effort to kind of do it, you've got a good culture as far as mental health goes. And we have a lot of people to thank for it, but we're really blessed.
Awesome. Tell me about starting the Journeyman Fire Conference.
That kind of started the same times as the podcast did. I was working with Grant Schwalbe and then Captain Zisk. He works on my job with me, and we kind of doing the podcast and kind of spun into, I want to do something locally. Where I live is a smaller town. They had paid part-time firefighters, and there's small fire departments kind of all around us, county ones where there's two folks on duty, driver and an officer. You may just have somebody and a volunteer in some other location. And I wanted to bring a lot of what I have had the opportunity to learn to the area. And so the local department was very supportive of it. They gave me everything I needed to. And we held it in a school auditorium. The first year we brought in 300 people. We had Ray McCormick, Grant was there, all sorts of people, Chris Tobin, Sean Donovan. And you had like big names, small towns, everything in between. All the money we raised above what paid for lunches and instructors and hotels and stuff all went to charity. And I think that year we did $20,000 in charity. We went to the Burn Center in VCU, which is near Richmond, and then the Virginia Children's Burn Camp. So there's a burn camp in the state of Virginia that kids get to go to every summer, and we donated the majority of it to the burn camp to help them out. And so we held it again the next year. Pretty good turnout. Same turnout that year. We did some hot classes. We had folks. They came back for 2 years. They were from Alaska. I'm like, man, you're onto something. When you bring guys in all the way from Alaska to come to small town West Point, where I work is about an hour away from where I live. It's just, like I said, it's just a small town, and these guys came in, and there's no hotels in town. So they all stayed about 30 minutes away from the town and came in and learned. And it was fantastic. COVID hit not long after that. And at that point, there was multiple events in Virginia. There was the event for Brad Clark, who had passed a few years earlier. There was another one in Richmond, Ben Martin was doing. And, in Smithfield does a couple, and then there's some on the other side of the state. There were so many events that they were pulling from each other. And how could I justify running an event, even though everything went to charity, that might pull away from something that contributed to Brad Clark's family after all that they've been through, right? Like, I would hate to dilute what the fire service has going just to have another event. Little did I know that COVID was going to come around a month or two later and reset everything. But at the time, I felt like, hey, this is great. We've been able to raise some money and pass on some information, but maybe it's just time to let it go for a few years and see if there's a desire to bring it back. And then kind of COVID happened and squashed everything. So I did an event during COVID in April of that year, which was 2020, which feels like forever ago. It was the quarantined online firefighter conference, right? So we had like 30 or 40 speakers over a few days, and each person went 30 minutes and just try to bring back the kind of socialness of it all. That was when we were all kind of social distancing and quarantined, and at least guys could get out and kind of feel that normalcy to it. And that did well. All the money we raised there went to the Gary Sinise Foundation, which at that point was purchasing N95s and gloves and stuff for fire departments and EMS organizations. So that was really important at that time to push forward on that. And they already had some connections on N95, so that was really a no-brainer. But the things kind of by the wayside. I'm tempted more and more now that my kids are older to maybe put on something again, because I really did enjoy the camaraderie of it. It's a lot of hard work because I was the one planning a lot of it, and thank God there were some folks that were willing to help out from outside. What's his name that runs Twisted Fire, and he runs the North Carolina Firemanship. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was nice enough to run like the soundboard and all that stuff when I was introducing some of the speakers. To have people that were teaching help fill in those gaps was nice, but it was hard as I was part of West Point Volunteers. I'm setting up the lunches and setting up where they're lodging. And so without a team of people, which is something we kind of lacked here, it was kind of hard to put it all on my shoulders, especially at that point. My daughter was 1, my son wasn't born yet. But going through those early years of parenthood and adjusting to all those things on the fly, my daughter was born in 2019. So it those first 2 years right after she was born. So it was just a lot. So now that things have kind of stabilized, my kids will both be in school full time next year. Might be time to think about bringing something like that back, or maybe going to somewhere in Newport News or on the south side of Virginia and kind of finding a more advantageous location that would give us ability for people to stay and be able to walk to the event, as opposed to having to drive 20, 30 minutes from their hotel into the event all the time like Journeyman was.
How's the podcast experience been? How's that going?
It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. We did a bunch with Laguerre, and probably my favorite one was the one with Aaron Fields. It's tough, especially when you're trying to balance it with kids. And again, that was something I was doing right as my kids were younger. So I was having to find times, and I missed you a couple of times scheduling. It's just difficult. Things just pop up and get crazy. And so we were doing it with three hosts, and that was even harder. Grant kind of took it and ran with it. His kids were a little older at the time, so he had more time because, they were in school during the day. This is back before he was a 9-to-5er like me. I find the medium difficult, and I think guys like you that are able to pull it off, you ask questions and just have your guests discuss it. There's some out there that feel like a morning shock jock radio.
Right.
And that drives me crazy. It's like I tuned in, and that was the thing with Journeyman's. Like, they tune in to listen to the guest, and we're just going to let them talk. We didn't want to edit it or anything like that. So what people said, good, bad, or indifferent, we really wanted to push for. That was really important to us, is let them say their side. The Fields one is fantastic because I think he spends like 45 minutes to an hour on it, just talking about like learning theory, which is amazing. Like, it goes completely off like fire topic and gets on the learning theory. People are like, oh, my wife is a teacher and she listened to that and she thought it was fantastic. And I'm like, we were doing something right. It's just one of those things that the time
Caught lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. And it worked for 6 to 12 months and then just kind of faded out as things do in the fire service, unless you've got the time to dedicate to it. That's the thing with like teaching and putting up stuff on social media for Mind to Fire. You got to work on it. It's not just going to be something that you can skate by with, because you've got to set up the guests and schedule them and be good at that and all those things. And if you're not willing to put that work in, a lot of people will try it for a week or two, or think they can do it, or think they do it, and it's not that great. And I'm still even sometimes uncomfortable coming on some of these because I have a tendency to ramble thanks to my ADHD. But it is a lot of fun to talk with people and get to know them. And I'm looking forward to going back on the Scrap in, I think, May, late April, May. And it's been 6 or 7 years since I did.
You were one of the early ones, were you not? Like 28 or something?
Yeah. I think I was still in the double digits when he really started it off, and now it's exploded. And Corley does a good job. And I've always kind of regretted my appearance. It was a day off and I had a couple drinks, and I wasn't like drunk or anything, but I'm just like, man, I would really wish I would have been able to do that. Like, just try again. And to be honest with yourself, like, he's moved on to bigger names, right? Like, he's got people that people want to hear from. Somebody had mentioned to him that maybe bringing me back on and mention my name, and probably don't belong on podcasts. I'm just a dude in Virginia trying to do what's best for people. But just to even be invited on some of these things is amazing. And I'm far better as a host because I can just listen. Sometimes I'm like, does anybody care about what I have to say? I know my kids don't. My kids don't listen worth a shit. So I'm not sure if people listen on these podcasts, but it's fun because it definitely makes you a fun little target in your own department sometimes, or somebody like, I heard your podcast, and you get embarrassed, right? You're like, what do you list? Like, I'm just a schmuck, man. I work the same job as you in the same fire department.
Well, you're doing great work, and the episodes I've listened of podcasts you've on have been great, and that's why I was looking forward to this conversation. And I'm stoked you're going to be back on Weekly Scrap. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it too. I'm looking forward to this. Like I said, it's been years in the making, so I'm glad we could finally sit down and get it. And it's all been on my end. I will say that. So I apologize for
it's all good. That. It's best when it happens when it's supposed to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Journeyman's one of the podcasts I recommend to anybody I can. If I ever give a list of like the top ones, it's always on there. It's one of the ones I wish were still like regularly, and I really enjoyed all the episodes. Even
like Larry McCormick, like I didn't know who Larry McCormick was before Grant introduced me. And then I'm like, oh, this dude that was at the Fire Factory in FDNY and, on squad, in Chicago, like that's amazing. And he's got so much to bring to it. Like you said, like it really did feel like lightning in a bottle when we had it. The funny thing is we're all still great friends. It's just life pulls you in different directions. And Grant's done fantastic things with the Grab podcast.
Like yes.
He's got such a And just like you and everybody else that does this, like for prolonged periods of time, he just has an ability to make people feel at ease, and you have the same thing, and just make people feel comfortable. And that was the thing, and that's where I think a lot of the episodes worked with Journeyman is it was just our friends like talking, right? Like I had known Fields and Laguerre for a few years, and it was just us talking instead of any kind of like feeling out period. We could just talk, and that was kind of what we wanted it to sound like. A couple guys sitting over coffee, bringing something up. One guy goes on a tangent. That's kind of what we wanted. That's why the logo even was the
Right, the
had
coffee
the coffee
stain.
cup. Yeah, we wanted that kind of feel to it.
I'll die on the hill that Grabs is the most important podcast in the fire service. That's my opinion.
I love it because it gives you mental sets and reps through somebody else's experience. And you can say what you want. A junior leader doesn't get ambushed in combat going into a valley because he's heard the anecdote from a senior member of the military that says, "Hey, kid, don't do that." So even if you don't put it into practice, you've heard it and thought about that kind of situation before, and you've prepared mentally for it. And that's something we don't discuss enough as far as officers or anybody in the fire service of going, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe I would have tried this," and then if God forbid the same situation pops up or you've got to make a grab, now you have a weapon of information of how somebody else tried it, how they did it, what they went wrong, what went right. And so it's kind of an AV version of what we call mental simulations or mental rehearsals, and whether that's a positive one, a negative one, or what we call a post-mortem, which is saying, all right, everything's failed, people have died, now we work backwards. It gives you that opportunity to kind of break it down in digestible bits that's not too long and doesn't kind of make your brain scramble because he keeps them so short. That allows you to apply those lessons learned on the job, which is just fantastic. And like I said, Grant does a great job of keeping it pretty on track.
Yeah, and it's not fantasy firefighting, right? It's like how the actual rescues went and what techniques worked and which ones didn't. And it's just matter of fact. And yeah, I think people just getting into the service can get so much value out of it. Oh, all of us can, but especially when you're new. Like if you just want to wonder what it's like, you can actually listen to people talk about what it's like that have been there.
You said fantasy, that's exactly where some of this stuff exists now. And again, it's not because anybody has bad intentions.
No,
I think it's just the generation of that we're living in that people want to make a difference. And again, they just don't know the nuance, don't realize like how down and dirty this job gets. Like it's really easy in a training building, no matter how hard you make it,
yeah,
it's still a training building. You go in and you don't have stacks of shit piled to the ceiling with a dresser blocking your only window out and the person's completely naked. And how many times do we discuss that like fire puts off humidity, right? So beyond your water you're spraying, the fire puts off humidity, everything's gonna be soaking wet. So even these down and dirty grabs that you see all over the place, they don't work, right? You grab something you can and you make your way towards the door. People hearing the raw, edgy, dirty side of this job is so important because it makes you want to be better so that you're limiting the time that this job can be that kind of raw and nasty, right? Like if we can make an impact, whether that's making the grab sooner or putting water on the fire better or sooner as well, we're limiting how nasty the job is at that point. And it's beneficial. And so people need to know when they learn through those kind of podcasts, the seriousness of this job, right? Like it's not all fun and games. And then just realize how quickly and how efficiently they need to act to kind of limit the things that can go wrong.
Yeah, and beyond being humbling when you have that experience or those experiences, it's downright demoralizing sometimes of like you've trained so long to do something and then all those variables are happening and it's out of the realm of what you could possibly be trained on, like you mentioned, and you're having such a hard time, you can really start to question, like, am I supposed to be doing this? Like, I thought I was ready.
That's one thing we need to talk on more too, is we don't discuss how much luck has a say on this job. You could be the best firefighter in the world. And if you went left instead of right, or if you put your hand down here or open the line here or chose the wrong window, and unfortunately we frame it as that person's not good on the job, or we let them stew in their own self-pity, but we just don't discuss of like, hey, you did the best you could, the outcome wasn't ideal, but the process is fantastic. We had a fire here in Newport News, and I discussed it a lot in my class. We didn't make the grab. The person ended up dying. They couldn't get the person out of the building, so they had to swap crews to have somebody else bring them out. So, like, everything that could go wrong in this fire could, right? Confirmed trap, heavy fire on the second floor, almost hoarding like conditions, just everything you could throw. A mismatched crew, no one worked together. There's an injury on the engine, so people came over to the ladder. Now I'm par five on the ladder. Again, I haven't worked with anybody on the truck before. The driver, it's his first working fire as aerial driver. So like all these things coming to fruition at once, and it didn't go right. But believe it or not, we came out pissed off, showing emotion, caring, right? The family bought us like a goodie bag, like gift basket with toys and water and a stuffed bear and cards. Like it should have been the other way around. Like we couldn't save their relative, yet here they are buying us stuff. And thankfully, I have the understanding and knowledge to know luck has a part in it. But here was a civilian who understood enough that these guys cared. They're obviously skilled and trained and have the best equipment. They did the best they could and they came up short. I mean, you want to talk about understanding intelligence and having emotional intelligence. They're mourning their own loved one, and they were like, these guys need to know that they tried, and we appreciate the fact that they did everything they could and it didn't work out. I'm so thankful for that because I probably would have been kicking myself, even with the knowledge of what luck can cause. You know, we can only do our best and everything else is just kind of left up to the randomness of the world. But I wish more people could have that interaction with the public because it's like, man, all right, they know. And I don't have to doubt anymore and don't have to have let that weigh on my mind of what if we did this? They know that we did everything we could. It's like I'm so blessed that I was in a situation that I won't doubt that forever to have that income. I think more people need to realize that the world is random and it compounds randomness. And, you know, it just kind of that whole Jurassic Park thing, right? Like chaos theory and all those things that build on each other. And it's non-linear. So you could do everything perfect and people are still going to die and things are still going to go wrong. It's just the way the world works. But we've trained and taught firefighters the other way. But when we start talking in nonlinear problems and making them understand black swan events and other things like that, that's really good for the psyche because it allows them to understand that even if they did fail, maybe it wasn't their fault. It was just a bad day. And one of the perfect examples I give is Pete Carroll in the Super Bowl. I think everybody remembers that Super Bowl call against the Patriots where they had, you know, Marshawn Lynch in the backfield as running back, and he chose to pass the ball on the 1 yard line and it gets intercepted. And everybody called him a dunce and called it the worst play in Super Bowl history. But statistically, if you look at it, for that year and the previous year, it would had 100% success rate. It was never intercepted in the end zone. And then for the 4 seasons leading up to it, it had a 98% success or 96% success rate. So if you look at the prior 4 seasons, it was almost a 98% success rate to get a touchdown or not, at least not turn the ball over in that scenario. And I think everybody in the world, if you gave them a 98% success chance, would take it in an instant. But when that one thing does go wrong, you didn't have a plan in that, but you can't control that. All you can control is the part leading up to it. And so that's called resulting, right? And so we judge the decision based on the outcome as opposed to the process. And if you judge Pete Carroll's process, it was sound. And I think a lot of the times if we sat down and judged people's processes when they come up short, those would be sound. And we can't let the eventual luck or the non-linearness or the randomness of the world of how that impacted the result really let people how they feel about things. If we discuss that more, I think more people would come to terms with the fact that they failed, and you know we learn from it as opposed to just kind of wallowing or staying there in a place that they're not able to come back from.
Yeah, sometimes life gets a say in the 2%.
It sure does, and it was one of the things I've learned with going through Boyd is uncertainty and non-linear problems and understanding that. I mean, we are literally just on a rock spinning through space, and we control very little. Yet we've given ourselves this illusion of control. Whereas I could go on the interstate tomorrow, and everything could change for me forever. And that's why you hear people say like life's not fair and other things. You're right, it's not, because it's nonlinear and it doesn't really care about order. It will always actually move towards disorder. we've got to spread that out there. And, a lot of people, that's why we get jammed up on fire grounds. Well, I've done A, I've done B, I've done C. Well, the fire's not going out. I guess I'll just keep doing E, then F, then G. And it's like, hey, man, if you've done something for 5 minutes and nothing's changed, it's time to pivot. Something's not right. Either it's gas fed, it's wind driven, something's going on that you're not aware of. So we need to realize that this is a nonlinear problem, that the world does have a say, that bad luck does happen, and move on to something else. I think we'd see a great deal of probably a little bit of reduction in mental health, but also understanding that process is what matters as opposed to the result.
Yeah, and having the foundation of something and a plan that you actually put into practice. And like you said, as long as people know that we tried and we cared, I think that's the most powerful thing we can give them.
Yeah. I'd like to see more, and this is kind of offset, but if we look at like line of duty death reports, one of the things that I've thought about for years is we're very hesitant to ever talk bad about the dead. On one aspect, that's great, right? Because we don't want people taking pot shots. But I've talked to a lot of pilots because I think there's lessons to be learned for the fire service in how they approach accidents in flight. They're pretty gloves off. They do so much as to even judge the stress in the voice of the pilot even before the plane takes off. And there's lots of tests and things that they look at as far as cognitive saturation, cognitive overload, that I think the fire service could benefit from. I think we just need to move past thinking of it as talking ill of the dead or judging somebody, and we need to look at it as making sure it doesn't happen again. I don't know how we get there, but I think that's the next thing we need to include on the line of duty death reports is psychological things and other items that we can pick up. Again, it's not to blame anybody, and I know that people always get very defensive, and it's important that they do because they're passionate. But we've got to be able to learn from some of these things, because a lot of the things you notice in the NIOSH, the dirty dozen or whatever they call them, it's all repetitive, and it's the same incident over and over again. And I think if we kind of got into the psychological factors and a little bit discussed actions a little bit more as opposed to generics, and we got into the specifics of things without fear of being labeled as talking poor about people that have died, it's good. We've got to find a way to delineate positive information that comes from a tragedy versus somebody thinking we're talking poorly of the dead.
Right. And then if we don't address it, you're just endangering the people in the future. Maybe the thought of the fact that the person that we lost, if they could speak to us about what happened, maybe they would want everybody to know.
Yeah, and it's tough because people don't understand that everybody makes mistakes. And so they don't want to think their friend or their coworker or their family made a mistake, and they don't want it labeled that way. And that's a completely normal reaction.
Sure it is.
But I think we honor people more by being completely honest with ourselves and making sure it doesn't happen again. And I think that's one thing that the airline industry gets right. Obviously, it's financial for them too, but you don't hear them discuss the pilots' names. Like whenever I research it, like they're there, and I guess maybe within that community that's more detailed, but like outside, even when you see into the psychological factors and the mistakes they made, you don't see the pilots' names listed very often. You just hear like pilot A with so much experience. Obviously, we could do that in the fire service. We look at NIOSH, and that's how they refer to people, right? They call them the victim and firefighter 1 or 2. And I think that's where we need to get to, is keep the identifying features off, but make sure that we round out the whole picture, because there's so much that we can learn and we could benefit from, like on the science side, neurologically and psychology side. We got to get there. And I'm not sure we'll get there in my time in the fire service, but maybe.
I think the fact that it causes that discomfort in your chest, I think those things need to be talked about. Like if something is there, right? So it's valuable, it's necessary, but like you said, that just has to be done tactfully and respectfully, and people know that what the intent is.
Well, that's the problem in 2026 is I'm not sure
Fair enough.
people remember how to discuss things with tact and understanding. Like, one of the things that I like when I teach is I can see when people start to get uncomfortable, right? And so you back off. There's been a line of duty death, or there's been like an accident that's like something that I've talked about, or the things I'm discussing, I can back off or knock it down or tone it back. So many people don't have those abilities to read people anymore, because the internet's taken away our ability to do that, because we talk in sound bites online with no actual reaction. And so we've done it to ourselves, but people are just they'll just keep hammering stuff home with no tact, when it's really, you've got to read the room, read the people you're talking to, dial it back or ramp it up if you're the other way. But
You were talking on Student of the Game of actually someone you were arguing with online, right? And then you eventually met in person.
that's been a lot of people. Um, I think with social media, it's very, I was a kid too, in my late 20s, early 30s, doing stupid things. But when you meet somebody or you talk to somebody face to face, it's just like what I talked about earlier, like there's nuance in the job, like there's nuance in our positions. And the one guy was from San Diego. And I mean, we argued. When I say we argue, it was like every day. And I'm like, man, there's got to be somebody out there watching these two go at it on Twitter and just roll their eyes. And then I guess when we met, and it was like, okay, you were talking French and I was talking Spanish. And now that we sit down together, there's no language barrier, there's no context barrier. We can lay it out. You show me how you do things, I'll show you how. And we found so much common ground. But we only want to talk in these sound bites or one ways. Oh, you can only be an aggressive firefighter. Man, you can be a smart, aggressive firefighter that uses tactical patience and slows down. Like, I'm as aggressive as anybody on this job. But there's some times that if I haven't seen this kind of fire before, I'm looking out my window right now, there's a huge paper mill in town. When they get a fire there, it's the two guys in the fire engine. And I've been on that call for it. And I took a deep breath and I slowed down and I said, I've never been to a paper mill fire before. I've got one driver and he was looking a little ashen gray. So things weren't looking great. So, slow it down and pivot. And I think we'd have better outcomes in the fire services if we did that. But there's so much driving us to stay in our little vacuum chambers that limit our discussions and our conversations. There's a few guys out there that run pages that I don't want to reach out to through message because so much gets lost and they'll think maybe I'm picking on them or just being an ass. But I just want to be like, hey man, can we just sit down and grab coffee? That changes everything. Just that conversation. And even guys like PJ Norwood and Sean Gray, who I disagreed with for years. And I'm sure I'd probably threatened with a fist fight once or twice with PJ. We're cool now. And it's perspective, it's life, it's growing up and knowing that it's so local, right? Fire departments are so local. So even what I'm describing to you, you're going to look at it differently because your words are not the same as mine. So it loses so much of these online spaces that those in-person conversations completely change all that. It's something that we really need to get back to. And that's what I kind of like about things like podcasts is it allows people to kind of go into the depth and show who they are and go and expound more into their thoughts and mindsets.
Yeah, you touched on it briefly there, but you posted a while back about firefighter pages getting out of hand. Maybe expand on that for me.
There's just so much second and third hand learning going on. One of the things that I did, and I said it earlier in this podcast, was I only taught what I knew, right? Like I only taught estimating the stretch because that's what I had researched and got really good on. We didn't have long lines. So we had to know when something was short and when we had to create something. So I got really good at that as a backstep firefighter. I could do that. I wasn't an officer yet. So I was teaching what I did, right? With known quantifiable ways from sniper schools and from other people that had done estimating the stretch beforehand. But guys are teaching skills, tactics, strategies, mindset stuff that just either it's wrong or it just lacks so much nuance that it's going to get somebody jammed up because there's so much that goes into these strategy and tactics. And that's why experience truly matters when you do these kind of things. And it's the nature of the beast, right? Like the internet has created this. I think there's truly a difference between people that teach and instruct and people that are influencers. There's a lot of fire service influencers these days. And it's not a bad thing. It's like everything else in the world. We've got to discuss what's good information and what's bad. Because a lot of these folks hear just a statement and don't understand the nuance. But, if I'm talking to you or I'm talking to somebody that's got 25 years, we're talking on the same level. So, when I start talking about roof vent, the same issues, dangers, stuff like that. Or when I talk about interior fire attack, like that person with the same amount of time understands the unstated risks, the reality of the situation. But if you take a guy with 3-4 years and he's teaching guys to make, go on the roof, do this. If you don't, you're wrong, or it's not aggressive and you're doing what's wrong for the people. That nuance is so important and you're not passing that on. And so you're driving a lot of unnecessary issues. And to be honest with you, the worst ones are the ones that are just meme pages and influencers. The ones that teach people to write off their fellow firefighters because they're not as into the job as them. My biggest things was I go to every conference, and what do they always say? Like, oh, but I'm preaching to the choir. Well, that just creates an atmosphere where people go back and feel like they're better than people.
Mm-hmm.
And then that person in 2 months is going to be preaching to an empty church because there's no one there to listen to the message. I would go to Andy Fredericks when I was younger on the job, and the guy told me to give me a hard time because we're good friends. But he's like, yeah, anytime you came back from a conference, I'd take off the next couple of days so I didn't have to listen to the bullshit you spewed, right? But that's where people's mindsets are. And he's a good guy. He's into the job. He got made, like, good officer, but he just didn't want to be preached to or talked down to because you come back with this kind of, oh, I know more than you, and whether you mean it to or not, and it just happens, right? And so it creates this divide amongst people, and people have fed into that, and you've got other pages that are just slamming chiefs, putting people in spotlight without both sides of the story, right? Like, the cool thing is now to shit on, like, admin chiefs. And I get it, we've been doing it for years, but as somebody that's been in admin for 16 months now, most of their time is spent working for the people on the floor. And some of the things can feel out of touch, I guess, if you're not paying attention, but they've got a reason for everything they do. And most chiefs aren't just going to say, well, tough shit, take it. They frame these folks as all chiefs are bad, or, you see some of these stickers with insults for chiefs and they're selling them. But you're selling poison to passionate people.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder why people don't want to join this job, or you wonder why these guys get upset at their job and move on to another department, because you're sowing hate and discontent amongst somebody to not appreciate those who aren't into the job like them. One of the biggest things I did to fix things where I work is be nice to other people, regardless of how into the job they are. It's okay if somebody shows up for a paycheck. It's a municipal job. At the end of the day, wherever you work, the city, the county, that's acceptable to them. Should you set higher standards and push them? Absolutely. But don't think they're any less of a firefighter because you say so, or you think that they don't meet a certain standard that you've created in your head. Because some of the most badass firemen I've ever met, some of the guys retired with 35 years that are the most influential firefighters in my life, were guys that just did it for the paycheck and couldn't tell you any other department besides Newport News. But guess what? When those bells rang, they were the best out there. And young me would have written off somebody like that. And we're still doing it, and then not taking some of the senior advice or advice from people. And it's like, these pages are just driving wedges and really creating friction that doesn't need to be. Like, I can't count how many times I'm like, hey man, delete that. Don't post that. Don't do. And trust me, I'm the king of, I feel bad for a lot of the stuff that I've posted, but it seems like it's just accelerating because negativity sells, right? That's kind of where we're at in 2026. And if you put some insult on a shirt or a hat or a sticker, somebody's going to buy it. And I'm not talking about stuff like Hit It Hard from the Yard. I think those guys have turned what they initially started with and turned into something fantastic, where they raise money for guys that die or injured or people that are needed help. Because I think that's just genuine ball busting. But there are some that profit off of poisoning young minds and selling shirts and hats and T-shirts to try to sow a division in the fire service because it sells, and it's disheartening.
Yeah, I can't speak to the specific psychology of it, but I remember reading that teams bond if they have an outlier or a scapegoat within the group. Even within the same department, you could see that, right? If we can find, or in the service in general, if we can blame a type of person in admin that's our outlier, now we bond as a team over not liking those people.
It's tribalism in its finest, right? And when you can find that common enemy, and that's what politicians have been doing for years, right? It unites the crew. But if you can go beyond that cheap kind of camaraderie, right? If you go to something more like a psychological safety, where you empower. So Google did a study a few years ago called Project Aristotle, and they went through 180 like high performing teams, and things that you would think like that made them good is not actually what made them good. The number one thing was psychological safety, that people felt comfortable speaking up in dissenting opinions or saying something that's not necessarily popular. Finding a common enemy does work, right? Militaries Politicians do it all the time. But if we want to put the real work into leadership and creating teams, it starts with everybody feeling comfortable to contribute and having that psychological safety, because that's a productive team. The other one, they may be high performers, right? And I've been part of those crews. They may be high performers and they might be fantastic, but they're bringing morale down through negativity, sacrificing the organization for their own team. And what we really need is a team that pushes the organization forward, not hurts the organization through their own negativity.
Anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Well, one thing I'll add is, so the book also has a workbook to it.
Okay.
It's got like over 100 different exercises, and a lot of it's like journaling or quantifying, like writing down or remembering something that you've gone through. Or there's some visual exercises and some psychological exercises in there too. Don't feel like you need to get it if you get the book, but it does kind of take you out of your comfort zone. And even in my like the first little introduction part, I was like, if you feel silly, don't do it and move on. And then if you want to come back to it, go to it. But if something makes you feel silly as you go through, like what I focus in on Mind of Fire, I feel that those are the ones that tend to expand your boundaries the most, because you're put in an uncomfortable position. I'd worked through most of the exercises in the workbook. They can be done as a team, but really as an individual, if you just sit there by yourself and kind of forced to come to terms with some of the stuff, it goes in the better. So that's available for people out there. I think together, if you buy both paperback, it's like $45. Trying to make it as cost effective as possible. And the workbook's in color, which is what makes it more expensive, is because I had to print in color for some of the exercises to be able to look at the colors and delineate. So
what website can they find it on, and where can they find you if they want to get a hold of you?
I've got links to the book on mindoffire.com. The book and the workbook are both available on Amazon. You can just type in like Mind of Fire book. And I think like one of it's like, the bottom of typical Amazon, right? Typically purchased with. I can't, because they're published through Amazon, I can't put them as a bundle. They don't allow bundling through Kindle direct publishing. Try to keep it relatively cheap. I know that some of the fire service books out there are gotten pretty expensive, but I think my paperback's like 20 and the hardback's like 30. It's like 300 plus 350 pages, something like that. So there's lots of stuff in the book to go into. If you want to find any information about it, you can email me at info at mindoffire.com. There's a contact page on the website that's got my email, my phone number, or you can just submit right through the website. Try to keep it as simple as possible.
Well, I appreciate your time, man. I know you're a busy guy.
I really do appreciate you having me on, man. I listen to what you put out, and it's fantastic stuff. And it's like I said, you do a good job hosting, where you ask the questions and let people just talk to their heart's content and ask them to expound on the important stuff. And you're doing great stuff, man. We really appreciate what you contribute to the fire service.